G'day guys, welcome to another YouTube video of the Origin Canine YouTube channel. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go through my history and I'm going to go through how the business started, why it's called Origin Canine, that type of stuff. Now last time I put a video out, I asked for requests and that was the consensus for this first video was, who are you, what's Origin Canine? Tell us the backstory. I mean, the people that asked the question know who I am and what the business is, but it was just like a, let's get the backstory sort of thing. Excuse me, I'm going to finish my coffee, my decaf coffee. So, really brief history about me. So I grew up in the eastern beaches of Sydney, which is a relatively nice area. It's a very nice area. So I was pretty fortunate in that sense that I grew up somewhere really nice. I didn't have any major challenges when I was a kid. Home life could be a little bit tough, but it was nothing that I couldn't overcome and nothing I haven't recovered from. I went to pretty regular high school, played sports, went surfing, chased girls, normal sort of stuff, right? Left school in about 2006. And then when I was about 15, I wanted to leave school early. This is about 2004, thereabout. My dad suggested I go to the army. He suggested a few things and I just chose the army. So I went down that sort of rabbit warren of exploring what the army might look like and the different jobs and whatnot, and I got very excited. So that was sort of in my mind for the next few years until 2007 when I joined the Australian Army Reserve. Now, I stayed in the Army Reserve for a couple of years at the 2nd 17th Royal New South Wales Regiment, which was like an infantry unit. So infantry was my trade, and infantry is like a frontline soldier, combat, that type of stuff. Very typical military sort of thing that you'd think about when you think of a soldier. So then I went to the full-time army in 2009, got posted to the School of Infantry as a semi-instructor staff kind of role. Spent a year there, then I went to the 3rd Battalion, which was an airborne regiment at the time. I did a deployment to Afghanistan. Afghanistan was an eye-opening experience for me in the sense that I was very interested in history when I was a kid in school, particularly war history, Second World War, that type of stuff. So for me to go on my first deployment and see what war was like up close was interesting, eye-opening in some ways, a bit of a letdown in some other ways. So in terms of combat, for example, the combat that I was exposed to was reasonably sporadic, and I wasn't necessarily directly involved in a lot of stuff. I was sort of on the peripheries. And that's sort of what war can be like, I guess. You're not always right up the front in the gunfight, dodging bullets behind rocks. So, most of the stuff I was exposed to was trauma casualties. So people that had been shot or blown up by IEDs. So that was my first exposure to that type of violence. Other exposures were the aftermath of Australian soldiers being killed, the violence that was sort of prevalent in the local community, things they used to do to each other, and stuff like valley clearances and whatnot, mostly in support of those kind of things because of the particular role that I was in. So yeah, all in all, Afghanistan was an interesting experience, but it really left me wanting a lot more. So when I was over there, I saw the Special Forces guys flying around in helicopters, doing raids and cool stuff that I wanted to be doing, which I thought I should have been doing as an infantry soldier. So when I got back from that deployment, I left the military for a brief period and then got back in as Special Forces. So I applied, was accepted into this sort of administrative application process, went and did a selection course, physically, mentally demanding period of time where they sort of assess your attributes, your physical attributes, mental resilience, all those sort of things, right? Once I finished that and was then selected, that went for about 6 weeks. I was then at the reinforcement cycle, which was the training to be a Special Forces soldier. So all the skills that you needed, like explosives and amphibious operations on boats and small unit tactics, driving, weapons, close quarter combat, those sort of things that really make you separate from the regular Australian Army. So I got through that course, which was about 10 months. So all in all, selection reinforcement cycle was about 12 months. I went to the 2nd Commando Regiment on the east coast of Australia, which is a direct action unit. So, direct combat, that type of stuff. First posting for me was domestic counterterrorism on what we call the Tactical Assault Group East, which was the Australian Army's response to domestic terror threats. So we would be in support of the police tactical groups who would generally respond directly to those threats. We were sort of like a layer of protection, a layer of contingency, if that makes sense. So anyway, did a year of that. Then the following year, we went over to Iraq in the campaign against ISIS. And again, that was another interesting trip. In terms of the operational focus and operational direct involvement, it was a little bit less than Afghanistan, but I actually enjoyed the deployment a lot more because I was a special forces soldier. So I felt this great sense of honor that I was in this unit and that I'd been deployed and I was with these caliber of guys that I was with. I had a great group of guys in the place that I was. And, we were having some real-time effects on the battlefield, which was really cool to see. So we weren't going out and engaging directly with the enemy in the way that we would have done in Afghanistan or the way that the Iraqis were doing. We were there as a bit of a training and logistical support capacity. And I don't mean we're making orange juice and giving them sausage rolls at half time. We were supplying intelligence and that type of stuff to help them in their campaign, training them to do their job properly when they went out to fight ISIS. A few little base incursions at that time. So our base got invaded a couple of times by some ISIS guys, suicide bombers, that type of stuff. Again, which was interesting, but I still sort of hadn't had my fix of the action, if that makes sense. We'd been rocketed and a few things like that. But I was really chasing a lot more action. So in that sort of sense, that second deployment was still a little bit, I was still left wanting a bit. And that was basically how I left my operational career. I did some interesting things, was involved in some cool stuff, but I never really felt that I was as involved as I would have liked to have been and been tested in the way that I would have liked to have been tested. And this is kind of relevant later to when I start talking about imposter syndrome and feelings of inadequacy and that type of stuff. So anyway, I got back to Australia in 2017. I was then put on the military working dog course, or the Special Operations Military Working Dog course. So 2nd Commando Regiment had assault dogs at that time. So I was suggested by a friend of mine, or nominated for that course by a friend of mine who was down there, and I accepted and went, yep, cool, let's do it. Now, I had no particular interest in dogs previous to this, right? I'd seen them before. I thought it was really cool sort of capability, but in the same way that I thought the army was really cool. I had this very generic idea about what it was about and what my involvement would be. So I went down there, completed the course, and then was employed as a special operations military working dog handler. Now, in the meantime, I had gone through this divorce with my ex-wife, which was very traumatic to me for a number of reasons. I'd made a few poor personal choices, which subsequently ended the marriage, which was my choice to sort of end it based on, on my decisions and my choices and my mentality at that time as a young bloke. So essentially that left me pretty scarred in the sense that I carried a lot of guilt and a lot of shame in relation to that relationship. And then that carried over into some pretty severe depression for me, which then spilled over into my work. Now, for anyone out there who's watching this, who's ever been in the military or in a special forces unit, those aren't the sort of places that you want to have your personal life interfere with your work, because it's life and death. You can't afford to be making mistakes and making other people pay for your mistakes. So, that sort of led to a worsening of my depression. And then in early 2018, I decided I was going to commit suicide. And I gave it sort of a half-assed attempt, more of a cry for help. And then, my work found out, and then I was essentially taken off the tools. I was out of the platoon, eventually lost my dog as a dog handler, lost my career as a dog handler. My military career sort of died after that. And then 2019, I made the decision to leave the military. Now, I made this decision on my own. I wasn't pushed out. I wasn't kicked out. But I think it was definitely the right choice for me in the sense that I hadn't fully recovered. Now, I had dealt with the guilt and the shame and whatnot and the divorce, but I developed this, what I learned later was a serotonin deficiency. So I basically had no happy left. My brain couldn't produce any happy hormones. So I left. And I had this massive gaping sort of hole in myself in the way that I left and losing my dog career. So what I did was I went into the pet dog training world. I was like, well, I'm not happy with losing my dog career. I'm going to go do something with dogs and sort of make up for what I lost. And I went and did that. I did some pet training for a couple of years with the Stoic dog. It was my first business out of the military, and it was my sole source of income. And in that time, I'd met some other people that needed my services in some sort of corporate spaces and a couple of little government spaces. So I did some consulting, offered some, capability advice, did some training for some people. And at that point, I wanted to make a distinction between my pet stuff and my working dog stuff. Now, remember, my formal education was with working dogs. It was to fulfill a role. It was behaviour and function and, do this, as opposed to how do I fix a dog with anxiety, with fear, with aggression, those type of things. So the pet dog stuff was a big learning curve for me, and I made a lot of mistakes and I learned a lot of things. And it was a good way to enhance my knowledge in dog training and my mentality towards training, and I learned a lot of personal lessons in that time. But really, pet dog training wasn't for me. Regular people aren't my people. I've got a very specific group of people I like to associate myself with and hang out with. And I don't mean that like in an elite sense, like I only hang with the special operations guys. I more mean, I like to hang out with people that are very common to me, who have the same attributes, the same principles and morals, and we see life eye to eye, right? And those people are military and police officers. So I started moving in that direction, and I started training some what we call dual role dogs or multi-purpose dogs. So dogs that do tracking and detection and also bite work. So I bought some puppies and I trained a few dogs up and sold them, and had some other people sell some dogs through my company. And in that time, I was using a lot of repurposed pet equipment or stuff from overseas or stuff that I thought was inferior quality. And I just really felt I could do a better job, not necessarily making it, but coming up with some better ideas. So what I did was I came up with a few ideas, 3 o'clock in the morning on the whiteboard, jump out of bed. Oh, got an idea, run into this room here. Oh no, it was my other house, sorry. So I ran into the opposite room and wrote some stuff on the whiteboard, drew some pictures, went back to sleep. And I validated some of these ideas relatively early, asked some people who were in the police military space, and they sort of confirmed it. Got rid of a few ideas nice and early, which is good, which is always a good part of the creative process. And then I got my partner to make up a couple of things with a sewing machine, and they were sort of pretty good, the way that I wanted it to be. So then I found a third-party manufacturer, Krieger Industries, guys up in Townsville, another veteran-owned business. Stuck with them for a little while, and then just as we were starting to build some momentum, there was a lot of logistical and communication difficulties, being me in Brisbane, them in Townsville, and the communication between the two via WhatsApp and email and phone calls and drawing pictures. It was quite difficult to sort of convey a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do. And I just felt if I had a lot more control over this process, I'd be able to do things a lot faster. Now, they produce some very, very high quality gear, and I love the quality of what they did, but I just wanted more control. So I ceased business with those guys. I sold my car. I injected a lot of my savings, in fact, almost all of my savings, into Origin Canine, and I just burned the boats. I just went hard. I bought material. I bought podcasting equipment. I made some hats and shirts and all this sort of stuff that I know that I should have done probably later before I did all that. But anyway, and then employed a team member, Catherine, who's down at the shed today making some gear. And I did this big road show, went to a bunch of different agencies, tested a bunch of ideas, failed some ideas, validated some ideas, and then basically I've just been constantly trying to improve the business, myself, the products, the way I do things. And I'm actually really, really happy with the result so far. And I'm happy with where we're going, happy with the people I'm dealing with, the way I do things, podcast, YouTube channel. If I hadn't validated all those ideas really early, I probably wouldn't have known what to do later. So the fact that I did that early allowed me to go, okay, well, there is a market for this stuff. People are interested. Things like podcasts and YouTube channels are actually what people want to see. So I'm going to do it. And that's been the story of my business. Ask some people some advice. Just start doing some stuff. I definitely don't do it perfectly. I probably don't do it that well when I first start, but I'm happy to make mistakes. Perfect example, right? This is the second time doing this video. I filmed a 15-minute video of pretty much everything I've just said, with a slightly different background. My microphones are in a different position. I was wearing different clothes, different lighting, all sorts of stuff. And now I've come back a second time because I used some editing software that didn't work very well. And now I'm doing it again with some better editing software and some, I'm learning some lessons. And that's kind of the story of the business. I've got the purpose is there because I'm so passionate about this stuff, because it's so closely linked to my personal history and my personality and my ego and my sense of self-worth. I have to make it work. I have to. So I just dive in and I just do things and I fix them on the fly, and I get better each time I do it, and I make mistakes and I learn from them. And that's what Origin Canine is for me. It's the stuff that I love to do, and I'm happy to make mistakes because I know my purpose. I know my purpose. I know who I do it for. I know why I do it, and I'm getting much better at the way I do it. So, yeah, in a nutshell, that's Origin Canine. That's my origin story. Now, the name Origin came from, I was sort of going, what's the name that is going to convey my origin story? And this is the way I thought about it, my origin story and the origins of where I want to bring the industry back to. And I was like, well, I just used the word twice, origin. So essentially what I'm looking to do is, yes, convey my origin story and sort of fill that gap in my life that I lost when I lost my military career and dog career, but also bring a lot of the industry stuff that we get from overseas and bring it back to Australia, to its origins. You guys are probably familiar with Jocko Willink and his company Origin. That's what I want to do. I want to build up this big skills deficit in manufacturing in Australia, specifically for dog equipment. I want to fill that gap in the dog market, and I want to put Australia on the map. And I want to show the world what Australians are capable of doing, and I want to show regular people and society the value of dogs and what they do for society, particularly in the face of a lot of these things that happen in the media. So recently, California, I think, is, there's a perceived ban on police dogs because of this discrimination perception. And, those are the sort of things that I want to fight against, not necessarily by debunking and saying they're wrong, but providing a counterculture and providing a solution to a lot of the problems that I see in this industry. So, yeah. That's it, guys. Hey, look, if you like the stuff that I'm putting out, albeit I've put a couple of videos out, or if there's something that you want to see, something that's interesting to you, something you'd like me to do, chuck it in the comments. So give us a comment below, give us a like and a subscribe. So the more subscribers and likes I get, the more traction the channel gets, the more people that'll be interested, and give me feedback so that I can start pumping out some better quality videos. It's not just me sitting here in front of the camera. And some of you might find that interesting, and some of you might not. Some of you might not have even got this far. But I want to start putting out some content that is relevant to the industry, that does add a lot of value, and that may be, provide some food for thought for you guys out there in the canine space, particularly the military law enforcement space. So, yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks very much for listening, and I appreciate the questions I've had so far and the input. So, yeah, like, subscribe, give us a comment. It feels weird saying that, but I'm going to have to start saying it at the end of my videos because that's business and that's me learning. So, yeah, guys, thanks very much for your time, and I'll see you later.